Hey everyone, I'm Luke,
And Max.
and welcome back to the Upside Down Thoughts podcast. And we are here back today for the Martinsville Cookout 400. Welcome back, everyone. So obviously we took a little bit of a little break between podcasts. We have been pretty busy, but we're back on the podcast grind with Martinsville. So we're going to get right into the qualifying order with Christopher Bell on the pole position, continuing his dominating start to the 2025 season, with Chase Elliott joining him on that front row.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick up right where you left off here, and this is a complete continuation of just your average Martinsville starting top 10 at least. You see Bowman, Larson, your other two Hendrick cars, uh, or I should say two of your other Hendrick cars, and then you got Denny Hamlin, who's won here multiple times. Chris Buescher, a great starting spot for RFK. It's great to see that number 17 Fastenal Ford up there starting sixth. Logano seventh. He's always been up there at Martinsville. It's one of those classic tracks that your veteran drivers are always seem to be up there towards the front. Bubba Wallace, good qualifying effort with his team 2311 teammate Tyler Reddick right behind him, and the other Hendrick car and William Byron in that 24 to round off the top 10. So all 400 cars in the top 10. That's something to definitely watch throughout the race, as well as both the 2311 cars in eighth and ninth.
Right, and as you said, if you asked me, who would you pick in the top 10 qualifying at Martinsville, and if I didn't watch qualifying, I would say at least like 7 of the 10 drivers in the top 10. It's kind of your typical short track qualifying at Martinsville. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's your top skill level in the sport.
right.
Basically, it's not even exactly your best equipment. It's your most talented drivers. I mentioned your veterans. I'm going to run through it just again. We say Bell, who has 3 wins already this season. Elliott, he hasn't won in a while, but he's a champion of the sport. Larson, champion of the sport, has won. Hamlin, well, not a champion of the sport, but it has 40 some win, or even more than that, I think.
Right.
Uh, Chris Buescher, he's been on the uprising ever since joining RFK. Bubba Wallace has been strong. Logano has been strong, still looking for that win. Reddick was good last year, still looking for that win. And Byron, of course, winning the 500, but at 24 car has been strong, just as his Hendrick teammate. So it's kind of the same trend that we see at most Martinsville races.
Yeah, and Chase Briscoe qualifying just outside the top 10 and 11th. I think he's really finding himself in that 19 JGR car this season. I didn't think he was going to struggle a little bit in the beginning, but he is fit right in with that team.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit, kind of off podcast, but saying Briscoe, how he's kind of been that quiet competitor. When we were talking, I said, we haven't seen him in the top 5 at all, or and then you go, well, he has was it 3 top 5 finishes.
Yeah, I
So
think 3 top 5s.
he's kind of been quiet up there, starting 11th and taking over for Martin Truex Jr. He's kind of filling those shoes very well, and those are tough shoes to fill. So it's good for him in that 19 car. But kind of on the other track of maybe not shoes to fill, but just a season that has been going a little bit rougher. He goes starting 12th, Kyle Busch. This is one of his best starting spots of the season so far. We've really only seen him at 1 or 2 tracks. We saw him at Coda for a while, where he ended up fading, and possibly another track or two. But with that name and the car he's in, the number 8 for Richard Childress Racing, we really haven't seen as much as as you might like to see out of him. He's outside the playoff picture. You need to see more.
Right, and as you mentioned, it's kind of been a rough start to these few races of the season, and I haven't really seen much intensity or want, to be up there, or maybe it just because he doesn't have the speed. I'm not really sure. I haven't even really heard a lot from him since Atlanta, to be honest. This is kind of the first time I've really heard his name in the starting grid, and where he's qualified. So it's an interesting start for this 8 RCR. Kyle Busch. It's just kind of weird, It's for how dominant he was been, even on the beginning of RCR, 2023. It's just weird. It's odd to not hear his name every single week.
Yeah, definitely. That's a driver that you hope that team can pick it up as we get into the latter half of the season. But moving on from there, we have Ty Gibbs, 13th. Josh Berry, he has his win at Vegas. That was kind of out of nowhere, but that car's been strong all year. Not sitting in a great spot in points. But with that win, he finds himself locked into the playoffs as long as 16 or more don't, or more than 16 drivers don't win. So it's been a great season for him so far, and he got the Spire 71 and Michael McDowell 15th. That car has
Mhm.
had speed in qualifying so far this year.
Right, and you mentioned Mike McDowell. That entire Spire team has just completely flip-flopped from last year, and they've been true contenders, not even just dark horses, as some people I've heard call them. I think they're serious contenders for the playoffs right now with the momentum that they've gained from these first few races, and hopefully the consistency stays. They have a lot of young talent, and Michael McDowell being the veteran that he is, I think that team is it's going to be dangerous coming these next few races.
Yeah, you mentioned he's a great veteran talent for that team, and this is a team that if you even thought about them making the playoffs 2 or 3 years ago, the majority of avid NASCAR fans would probably laugh in your face.
Yeah, right.
So it's really awesome to see this team with this much speed. Rodney with bringing him over as crew chief. Is that making the difference? Is that a big thing there, or is it just the team in general? Because 4 spots further back in 19th, uh you have Zane Smith, who's there. He was a Spire driver in the past. So is Spire working as that good development program and moving their drivers up? Is this an improving program that you're going to see start making the playoffs in future years?
I think 100%. Like you said, they brought Rodney Childress over for the 7 car. But I think it really starts for me with Hocevar and how confident he has been since the Atlanta race, where he had a chance to win. Unfortunately, the caution came out. Um, as soon as he, you know, caused all that mayhem, if you want to call it, or just aggressive, confident driving, that team has seriously been in every single conversation in every single race. I feel like we've talked about them every single week. We've talked about their name in qualifying, stage one, stage two, and at the end of the race, they're always there. Quietly fighting for that respect that I think they've earned for me at least. I haven't really seen the credit that they deserve from other NASCAR fans or media. Um, but seriously, like I said, I don't think they're dark horses anymore. I think they're serious contenders.
Yeah, 100% in agreement there. Definitely to be watched out for. But moving further back in the lineup, we see the other RFK car, Ryan Preece, 21st. Cindric, the Penske number 2 in 20th. And then kind of mired back in the field. This is something I want to talk about. In 27th, he's been here all year, not necessarily 27th, but this, 24th and back. Brad Keselowski. This car has just not had the speed. And I kind of want to know your thoughts on this.
I I figured you were going to ask this, and I wish I have a better answer, but I seriously don't know because you look at his two teammates. They brought Priest over in the off season. They brought some new sponsors. Busher's been very consistent, and even Priest has kind of picked it up. Had some
Priest is having a
inconsistencies.
career year.
Yeah, he's really been strong. And then Brad, I don't know if it's because he's taking on a lot of pressure. He is the owner of the team. It would make sense. I feel like everything was going so right for this team. You brought on a career sponsor in Kroger. You brought on another amazing driver in Priest who has that veteran talent and knows how to be consistent. And then just you just fall off a cliff. Like I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, I would like to know if this is a matter. Is he giving the better equipment to his other two teammates?
I don't know. I mean, it would make sense because of how well those two are running and how bad he is, but it wouldn't make sense also because he's the owner and he's been dominant for so long that now he's just kind of it feels like he's just like almost giving up this season. Like, you know, it's just weird. I just don't have an answer.
Yeah, but unfortunately, you hope things get better for that six team. It's kind of very similar to the Kyle Busch situation. Obviously, Busch is in a much better situation. He's only in a two-car team, and he's not the owner, so he has a lot less pressure on him. So you kind of hope Brad can turn this thing around and have another strong second half to a season very similar to the 8 car.
Right.
But moving on from there. All the way in the back, you got Ryan Blaney, who had a rough qualifying effort. They just didn't like the car a whole lot, but they wound up making some changes, and they will be race ready. But moving on from there, I think that's kind of all the great points to make on qualifying there. It's actually kind of an eventful qualifying, a lot of storylines to go over. So, but moving
Yeah.
on from there, I say we can get into the race, and I'll let you take over from there.
Yeah, I just want to make a last little point. Casey Mears back in the 66 as a part-time driver. That's just something that just wanted to say. So kind of cool to
Yeah,
have him back in the field.
yeah, it definitely is. That's someone that was retired. He was in retirement. So to see him coming out of retirement, maybe he's going to get a few more rides in there. There's the rumor that Casey
Hmm.
Kane's going to be back in a car for Rockingham and Xfinity. So
Yeah, it'd be
it'll
cool.
be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, but moving in to finally the start of the race, obviously Bell, Elliott on the front row with Bowman and Larson behind them. You have three Hendrick cars surrounding Christopher Bell. That is a scary sight to see. But the green flag would wave over the Martinsville Cookout 400, and very quickly we'd move into this single file snake racing on the preferred line that we always see from Martinsville. Everyone trying to get into that top groove and then run that preferred line. Just trying to get a feel for their cars, trying to figure out how their car works in the air, see if they can pass, see if where they can pass on the track. It's just kind of the stage one, kind of first few laps are kind of just a feel out for these cars and for these drivers at a track like Martinsville.
Right, and just as you mentioned, a feel out, and they're getting in line. Chase Elliott's going to poke out a line, and he's going to make the move on Christopher
Yep.
Bell, and take over the lead. And no sooner does he do that in turn 3, caution is going to wave for debris.
Yeah, and like you said, he quickly found his groove and got out of the racing line, like you said, and took over the lead. And then very, very quickly after debris caution, this is just something interesting that I didn't even notice. This is the first time that Chase Elliott has led a lap since the Daytona 500, which is crazy because I mean if not, he's been one of the most consistent, if not the most consistent driver in the field. It feels like I feel like he's always up there in the top five.
Right, I want to touch on that a bit more. This guy won the Clash.
Right.
A lot of people I think forget about the Clash because it's technically preseason, it doesn't count, yada yada. And then in the Daytona 500, it's the only regular season race that he has led laps in, and he led a whole 2 laps, 2 laps of the Daytona 500. So maybe you're expecting more out of this 9 car, but I don't know what else to expect. He's running up front. He just can't seem to find the lead and lead laps.
Yeah, I feel like it's always been kind of that thing where he's, run up in the front. It's just he has trouble kind of breaking that barrier and winning races in this kind of next gen car. But he's been, in my opinion, the most consistent driver in this next gen car by a landslide for me. It's just getting those wins has kind of been a struggle, and it's been a struggle for everyone. We're not seeing guys win 5, 6 races a year anymore. Um, so I have no worry for him, and as much kind of as a veteran driver as he is now, which is crazy to say. Um, yeah, he's been dominant this season, even though he hasn't gotten that win.
Yeah, you're 100% right there, and that'll bring us to another restart because of the debris caution. Most will pit, some will stay out, which will lead to a Barry Cindric front row. Cindric will spin the tires, and Josh Berry will get away with the lead.
Yeah, you mentioned Josh Berry. I feel like we're either talking about Bell, Hendrick, or one of the Team Penske's and Josh Berry leading. Like, I feel like we've said this every single week. These guys just find their way to the front row. It's kind of funny to laugh at because, you go back to Las Vegas or you go back to, a few races prior to that, Atlanta even, these guys are just consistently finding their way to the front. And it's just good qualifying. It starts with the qualifying.
Yeah, it absolutely does. They are putting themselves in the positions to get these good runs.
Right.
So you can't say, oh, it's complete luck. They would never be up there if they actually followed the normal pit cycle. No, I don't think that has anything to do with it. They're up there on speed.
Yeah.
Like let's say you get a P5 finish because everyone, P1 to P30 crashed. Well,
Yeah.
that's a very different scenario than I'm qualifying consistently in the top 10 and the top 15, and I'm consistently finishing in the top 10, top 12, which is I think the case for most of these drivers you're mentioning.
Yeah, I agree. Um, but kind of moving into the restart, you mentioned Barry and Cindric would take the lead, but what interesting point is Brad Keselowski did not pit during that caution, and he would restart in fifth position, and he would cause some havoc that was not really covered by NASCAR a little bit. He would cause havoc with Logano and Bell, mainly Bell. Bell would try to run into the back of him, get him loose, and they would both wash up kind of in 1 and 2 and lose a bunch of positions there. But just kind of an interesting strategy call for Brad. Maybe he's trying to get to the front row for if what feels like the first time this year, and really try to kind of see what his car does up in these top 5.
Yeah, we'd already talked about it. Brad's a guy that's been struggling. Just to be able to move to the front, even if it's on a pit strategy, and just almost say, "Wow, this is what the front looks like," and
Right.
that can almost act as a huge momentum booster, just to say, what, we can be up here, we deserve to be up here, and hopefully that's something that he can use moving forward. But moving on from there, we'll see Denny Hamlin get a little high in turn 3. He'll lose 3 spots, going from 7th to 10th. And then we'll see some more on-track passes as we get into what Mike Joy calls the fastest conveyor belt on Earth, as they all get strung out single file yet again. You're going to see Logano pass Blaney, move up to 4th. Barry's going to continue to extend his lead. Logano's going to pass Cole Custer for 2nd, who was someone that originally stayed out. And now I wanted to mention this because I found this really cool. Because Josh Berry, we've been talking about him winning Vegas, obviously. We've said that 1,000 times now, but it's just so cool to me to see this Wood Brothers team competing week in and out, and I see that Josh Berry has led more laps today for a Wood Brothers car at Martinsville since David Pearson in 1973, which he then went on to win that race. So it has been 50 years, 52 exact, since Wood Brothers has had a run like this at Martinsville. That's awesome to me.
Yeah, that's crazy. And with how the season has been going for Josh Berry, it's really cool to kind of see this much attention on the Wood Brothers 21 car. They had a lot of attention on them late last season when Harrison Burton won Coke 400 and made his way into the playoffs. But I mean, like I said earlier, every single week we are mentioning Josh Berry and the Wood Brothers, so it's really cool.
Yeah, it is. But moving on from there, just as we're talking about Josh Berry, getting away, leading a ton of laps, caution comes out. Chris Buescher and Carson Osavar get together on the front stretch, and Buescher will go for a little spin. That's all we'll really see there. This is kind of right in the middle of stage 1. So everyone's going to pit except Logano, Bowman, Keselowski, Allmendinger, Priest, Jones, Nemechek, and Ware. They're gonna stay out. And then we're going to see a few pit road penalties. Stenhouse is too fast, but he's kind of mired back in traffic. It's such a tough track to pass, with this new next gen package. And I say new, yet we're coming into the 3rd season in this car, or
4th, I think,
or 4th. Yeah, honestly losing track at this point, and the short track package is just still not where you want it to be. So
right.
We have other packages, like the intermediate package is great. We have that proof. We saw it at Homestead. Super Speedway package is great. You see it in the 500. It gave us 4 wide racing at Talladega last year. So the road course package needs to be worked on. Even at Chicago last year, I didn't think it put together a terrible race. But I think out of all the packages, if NASCAR was to choose one and kind of zero in on it, I think it's got to be the short track package.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree. It's definitely not where it needs to be, but in an era like this where track position and pit stops and pit road is so important, I almost feel like it kind of fits the car a little bit and kind of this era, to the point where it's attainable. In the playoffs, Martinsville I think is a great race. There's not many passes, and there's not going to be that insane last lap battle, but the strategy for Martinsville is absolutely insane, and track position is absolutely everything. So I think obviously the casual fan is going to say, oh, this short track package sucks. But I think, honestly, at some tracks, as I've done a lot of reflecting on the package, it kind of works. I mean, Martinsville for me is never a track that's like going to bring that insane intensity. It's for me, it's always about strategy and track position. And I think this package kind of works for this track, which is maybe a hot take. I don't know. I kind of like it for this track.
Yeah, and I think that all has to do with possibly the drivers figuring the package out. We saw Richmond last year. What a crazy finish that was.
Right.
And I think that's a perfect example of what you're saying. This package fits some of the short tracks.
Yeah.
So there's just others it has to work around. Like I'm going to put this out there, and Bristol needs to be fixed.
Yeah, you just can't pass.
That is one that we saw last year, and you can't pass. You have Hamlin and Truex playing follow the leader for the end of the race.
Right. Yeah. So that's good.
I just think that's the one track. I mentioned the package as a whole, but if they're going to take one track with that package that to be worked on, it should be that.
Yeah, and then in the regular season race last year, they kind of do that tire. Goodyear introduced a new tire where it wore out quickly to try to make it a more interesting race, which is kind of just interesting way of looking at it or going forward and trying to improve the package. I think just fixing the car there instead of trying to do this weird tire that wears off really quickly and makes everybody wreck. It was just kind of interesting, but it's a constant pro and con battle because at some tracks you have great short track racing and other tracks you just have completely almost unwatchable short track racing. So I'm interested to see whether they're going to take this or if they'll even try to improve it at all.
Yeah, nothing but great points made there overall. But getting back to the race, we're still under caution here from the Buescher Hocevar incident, and we're going to see Josh Berry, who is leading the race. He's going to basically lose his entire race to a battery issue. He's going to get pushed to pit road and eventually pushed back to the garage.
Oh, that sucks. Yeah, that is really, really devastating. As we were talking about him so highly, like you said, most laps led here at Martinsville for the Wood brothers since David Pearson, and then boom, just a battery issue or kind of an alternator issue with the car. It's just it's just unfixable. You can't do anything about that. You can take it back to the garage and work on all you want, but it's an unfixable problem for that car.
Yeah, it definitely is. But moving on to the restart, it's going to be Logano and Bowman on the front row. Logano's going to get the jump, and this is actually going to only be a 2-lap run to the end of the stage. So we're going to see Logano go on to win stage 1, followed by Bowman, Allmendinger, Keselowski, and Eric Jones, just as in the order that they restarted after the previous restart.
Yeah, and how about those guys you mentioned in the top 5? Allmendinger, Keselowski, Eric Jones. Like I was talking about track position and pit strategy, it's almost better, in my opinion, to take the track position over fresh tires and fuel in these scenarios and get those stage points. Obviously, for a guy like Keselowski, any points in the stage is huge. And even for AJ and Eric Jones, who have been running consistent, but, kind of just outside that playoff bubble. But for these late stage restarts and these, late stage runs, I'm taking track position over tires every day of the week because of this package. So I'm interested to hear your point on what you would take.
Yeah, I'm going to make the same. Actually, I'm going to take that back. I think this all depends where you sit in the point standings. If you are at the top of the point standings and you might not have a win, but you're up there with points, I would say pit. Get your car ready, get it set for the end of the race. Don't ignore the stage points. Make sure your car is ready to go for the second and third stage. But if you're someone that's back there in, let's say 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, someone that's right there on that bubble with 16th being the final playoff spot, every point matters. I've mentioned the fastest lap, last few weeks, taking the extra point for the fastest lap. This is very similar to that, but pit strategy could be the difference between finishing a race with 30 points to finishing a race with 36 points, and every point makes a difference, in my opinion. I'm a proud believer in that.
Yeah. and just even making your point stronger. Um, we saw obviously the regular season points leader gets that bunch of playoff points, and you saw Tyler Reddick win it by a single point last year. So if you don't think every point matters, you are sadly mistaken. So I love the points there. That's great.
Yeah, so then moving on from there, we're going to get back to the green flag after um, the Logano winning stage, and we're going to see a Bowman Elliott front row with Nemechek right behind in third. That's a great name to see up there.
Yeah, great. For the Legacy Motor Club team, who's been very again consistent. I feel like I said that 10 times today, but Eric Jones and Nemechek being very consistent in that Toyota car, and I feel like they've been really good at the short tracks that we've seen on the schedule so far. So great to see Nemechek up there in third.
Yeah. And then moving on from there, we're going to get back into the conveyor belt as we've had twice before already in this race. And Elliott's going to clear Bowman. They'll get in line. Hamlin's going to get around Bowman. They'll get in line. And Larson's going to get around Bowman, and they will get in line again. But then after that, both the cars who last pitted at lap 33, which would have been after the debris caution back in stage one, that being Bowman and Nemechek. I mentioned Bowman dropping a few spots, while Nemechek is as well. He'll go from 6th to 13th, and that's not a terrible deal. Nemechek started this race 16th. So even falling back to 13th, he's still +3 on the day, so I see no big deal there. But then I'm going to mention the biggest mover since the restart. We see Logano, who's up 9 to 20th. He was mired back in traffic in 29th, and we say how this is hard. This is a hard track to pass. Well, he's doing a great job. He's up 9 spots in 35 laps. So it's kind of interesting to see. We see that 22 car definitely has speed.
Yeah, and you mentioned he has speed. I feel like I was watching him run any line around the track, Martinsville. In 3 and 4, he was kind of almost running in the high line and still passing cars. So, um, he's definitely found the strategy and the kind of race that he wants to run. This early in the race is crazy. 100 laps in, and he's already found the consistency and how to pass, which is huge.
Yeah, you're spot on there as well. But just following that, we're going to see Elliott is slowly going to pull away from Denny Hamlin, who cleared Bowman, was up to second for quite a few laps at this point. And Elliott's now out to almost a full second lead, but then just as he's out to that lead, Burt Myers has a power issue on the front stretch from dead last, and he's going to have to get towed to the garage, which will bring out a caution.
Yeah, just another kind of unfortunate caution if you're, Elliott. You kind of just want to have this long green flag run that we haven't really seen yet today. And unfortunately, another mechanical caution comes out and kind of ruins that hopes of, finally kind of having a green flag run. But he will still remain as the leader, as he, like you said, was pulling away from Hamlin pretty far.
Yeah. And then following the caution, everyone's going to pit except Hamlin, Wallace, Gibbs, Custer, and Suarez, which is going to give us a Hamlin-Wallace front row for this restart. Hamlin's going to get out front, and Ty Gibbs is going to slot in right behind Wallace for second and third.
Right, and Hamlin and Bubba Wallace leading with Ty Gibbs right behind him, like you said, and then Cole Custer kind of making his presence known in this race. He would restart in the 5th position after kind of running a different pit strategy, but he would quickly fall back to 11th as he would get kind of pushed out in that top lane. Unfortunate. But man, he's been very, very, very quiet in this season. And, it kind of feels like this is the first time I've really seen him in the top 10. So maybe this is kind of the spark that he needs, or, getting more information on how that car runs at short tracks in the top 10. It would be, I think, huge for the Haas team.
Yeah, definitely. That's a team that is on a lack of information. That team was, or I should say, practically folded. It was Stewart Haas Racing, but now with Tony Stewart leaving the partnership and it becoming the Haas factory team, and Custer has no teammates, so there's no info to even build or information to even build off of. So I think their whole point of this season, it's probably a bad way of looking at it, but I don't think they have any intention of making the playoffs. I think every week they're going out and they're saying, let's put our car where we can to learn the most about it as possible.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Just, try to finish every single race and get as many laps in as possible at these tracks. And this is like a development season, I feel like, for this team. Um, I didn't expect them to even have a chance. Obviously, like I said, making the playoffs is, I think, out of the question completely for me. And this is just, like I said, development.
Yeah, and eventually moving on from there, the conveyor belt continues, and this will be the longest green flag run we will see as Hamlin will advance his lead out to about a second and a half over Bubba Wallace. But then for the first time this race, Hamlin is going to catch the tail end of that conveyor, and lap traffic's going to get pulled into the picture for the first time this race, allowing Wallace and Elliott to close in on him to within a second.
Yeah, and like you said, mentioned, we finally have that long green flag run that we've waited for, and so you see the first time that Hamlin takes over and meets lap traffic, but not an issue for him at all. Um, Elliott would eventually pass Bubba Wallace as his stuff was fading at the end. He was kind of trying to catch Hamlin and make a contention for that stage win. Just kind of used his stuff up too much, and Elliott would pass him, and that means that Hamlin would claim stage two with Elliott, Wallace, Ty Gibbs, and Briscoe rounding out the top five for stage two.
Yeah, and that brings me to another point. We see Hamlin go on to win the stage, and I mentioned back in qualifying, Hamlin is someone, a veteran driver that has always dominated his whole career at Martinsville. Well, it brings me to this point. The winner of stage two has gone on to win only one of the last 8 Martinsville races.
That's crazy.
So this is going to be a very, very interesting stage 3. Hamlin, he's against the odds here. So to watch how this 11 car will perform in stage 3 is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I did not. That's actually insane. I did not know that at all. But as we're under caution, Stenhouse would get the free pass as he was, the first car that did not go a lap down. So he would get the wave around, but the pit cycles obviously would come through. Everyone would enter pit road. Denny Hamlin would still lead, starting on the restart with Chase Elliott right next to him. Bubba Wallace right behind him. Just the same thing as we were seeing at the end of the stage. It feels like Hamlin and Elliott are definitely emerging as the guys who have figured out their stuff completely and are going to have a great battle in this start of stage 3.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly where I'm going to go. So green flags dropped. Hamlin, Elliott, front row. Hamlin is again going to clear from the inside because the inside lane almost always prevails here at Martinsville.
Yep.
It's very tough to hold on from the outside, and we're going to see Elliott jump in front of Bubba Wallace for second. But just as we're starting to get into a rhythm and everything's starting to file out, Riley Herbst is going to go for a spin in turn 1 from 28th after he gets together with the 2 of Austin Cindric.
Yeah, and Riley Herbst's name we haven't heard much today. Kind of just a typical Martinsville wreck in my eyes. Made some light contact with Cindric and just sent that car up and into the wall. Just kind of unfortunate. Like you said, we only had one long green flag run this race, and man, just can't seem to get another one going as we just kind of have these unfortunate single car caution wrecks or single car mechanical failures. So it's just an interesting couple of cautions that we've had so far.
Yeah, for sure. And then eventually moving on from there, we're not going to see anyone pit since it was only about a 5-10 lap run. So it's going to be the Hamlin on the inside, Bubba on the outside, because Chase Elliott, who would have restarted second, goes, you know what? I'm going to take the inside of row 2, and I'm going to give up the front row so that I can start on the inside and see if he could nudge his way in front of Bubba Wallace.
Yeah, I love the move. Elliott restarted next to Hamlin twice on the outside, and it just ended up being falling in that second, third position and having to battle Bubba to try to get back into second, and giving up a lot of time and to Hamlin. So he decided to go back in third, and he would clear Bubba Wallace right away. Only like 2 or 3 laps in for second, so it was a great call.
Yeah, it definitely was. And then no later than that, as Hamlin is continuing to extend his lead over Elliott, Hamlin runs into lap traffic again, and Elliott is going to start to close in again as he brings it to within .6 in lap traffic.
Right. So, yeah, like you said, you kind of encountered a more lap traffic as we're on finally another green flag run. Um, and then, Chase Elliott obviously going to slowly kind of take in. But here's a name we haven't really mentioned. Ross Chastain and Kyle Larson. We haven't mentioned Larson since qualifying, really, but they would kind of emerge in top 10 in sixth, as they were obviously running hard. With Ross, no matter what track, no matter where in the race, he could be 50 laps down. He's still going to run you hard. So they would battle hard as they are making contact all the way through turn 3 and turn 4, and kind of he was forcing Larson to really work for this pass on the high line.
Yeah, and they're going to continue to battle. This battle's not going to go away. And just as they're continuing to battle, the green flag cycle starts.
Yep.
But the green flag cycle will be intercepted by none other than a Shane Van Gisbergen tire lost in turns 3 and 4, leaving the pits, and that's going to lead to a little vacation for his crew and his for his pit crew and his crew chief as well.
Yeah, you mentioned Shane Van Gisbergen losing the wheel. I feel like most of the cautions that he caused has not been because he wrecked or he caused a wreck. It's because of a mechanical problem, like a wheel or a lug nut falling off or debris from his car. It almost feels like his pit crew is almost causing, the destruction of his car, and not really him, which is kind of
Yeah,
interesting
you're
as a
spot on.
first year Cup
I'm not
driver.
really sure. Yeah, I'm not really sure what's going on there. We
Yeah,
saw the same thing at Las Vegas, where he had the
right.
exact same problem leaving pit road. So is that just an inexperienced pit crew? That's what I would think.
Yeah.
We as fans don't get the great perspective on this, but I would like to see if that's just if that's a pit crew problem. I would like to see where his team sits in the pit crew rankings.
Yeah, and because, no surprising that he's going to be running in the back of the pack. It's his first year in the Cup Series, but it almost feels like he's just every time he kind of gets in, emerges in the top 30, almost it feels like something is just going on with his car that he has no control of. But
Yeah, and
what are you gonna do?
it's just yeah, it's just a shame for that 88 team.
Yeah,
But that's something I don't think the more he's in the top series of NASCAR up in the Cup Series, I that's going to happen last. Yeah,
right.
because for all we know, this could be a driver problem, something that he's not picking up on. Maybe he's doing something wrong with
Yeah,
the clutch or hitting something in the car that is forcing a vibration, and then these end up loss of these tires. So
true.
it would be interesting to find out. I would like to see if there's been an interview where he's been asked about that, because I'm kind of very curious
Yeah,
on that topic.
yeah. That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. Pit crew members are kind of like kickers in football. You don't really talk about them until they make a mistake. So, um, that's another interesting point. Maybe he could be doing something in the car that's causing this. So, we don't want to put all the blame on the pit crew members because they are just as important as a driver. But just as we were talking about pit crew problems, Chase Elliott would experience a pretty slow stop and drop him back into fourth as Hamlin, Bell, and Wallace would lead off pit road heading into the restart.
Yeah, which is going to give us none other than the Hamlin Wallace Toyota front row with Bell right behind Hamlin on the inside in third, which is going to show us Bell clearing Wallace for second. And it's going to give us a little bit of a weigh-in here again. It's going to stack up traffic between Larson and Chastain. They're going to be blocking each other for no longer sixth. They're up to fifth by this point, and Chastain is going to let his frustrations be known by giving Larson a shot going into turn 1 and then into turn 3 as well, causing Larson to get back behind Chastain and in line in sixth.
Yeah.
But no later, Larson will not even get the chance to get back to Chastain because we're going to see Gibbs spin off a turn 2 from 11th after contact with his, not his teammate, what's the word I'm looking for here? With his Alliance teammate,
Yeah, Alliance
Tyler,
teammate.
and Zane Smith is going to end up clipping Ty Gibbs as well here, and we're going to see our big one here at Martinsville, whole 3 cars.
The
So
big
I'll
one.
let you all have it.
Yeah, just for me, it's just a typical Martinsville wreck. Ty Gibbs started spinning off of turn 2, made contact with Reddick. Sean Smith got very minimal contact between the two cars and brought out the caution on lap 298, and we wouldn't have too many drivers coming during pit stops. Obviously, all the guys that were involved in wrecks came in, but we'd see Kai Byron and Ty Dillon enter that pit road to try to figure out some stuff for this restart. But Hamlin's still leading with Wallace on his outside, and Bell chooses to line up behind Hamlin, his teammate. Makes sense, as the green flag would wave. But just 3 laps later, we'd have another caution, and this is a very, very interesting one, as Gragson would spin after hard contact from Buescher, and they would not be too happy with each other after this wreck.
Yeah, definitely. We finally have our first Martinsville run, and drivers unhappy with each other. I mentioned Chastain voicing his frustrations to his crew with Larson over the radio. But this one, Gregson's gonna kind of leave his team out of it, and he's gonna take it into his own hands. While Buescher was pacing the lap after the wreck before pit road had opened, Gregson was waiting on him. So this I honestly love to see. These are the tempers that I think do a big deal for NASCAR.
Right.
These are the personalities that we haven't seen in NASCAR in a long time. So the fact that Gregson's gonna wait on Buescher here, and they're not actually gonna make any contact with each other, but Gregson's gonna block him and let him know that he's frustrated with him, rightfully so, as Gregson left the inside a little open, and Buescher kind of tried to fire it in there with a car that already has damage. So, his brakes might have locked up, but he still ends up being responsible for wrecking another car. So, this is definitely on Chris Buescher, and no, Gregson has a right to be angry.
Yeah, of course, Gregson definitely has a right to be angry. Buescher had involved in the wreck earlier in the race, so he's obviously hot-headed to begin with. And Gregson's been running in the middle of the pack the whole day, so he's obviously not happy. And then just two heads collide, and completely understandable from Gregson to wait and let him know that he wasn't too happy with the move. I don't think he did anything out of line or spin him under caution or anything like that. He just let his presence known, and it was honestly pretty cool to see that little personality come back, like he said, at Martinsville, where personality is the biggest thing.
Yeah, for sure. And that also brings me to this point. That'll be our 9th caution of the race, which is going to set a record for the most cautions ever in a 400-lap race at Martinsville. So that is really intriguing. We still had 85 laps to go at this point, and we were already at the caution record.
Yeah, that's crazy. Lots of cautions. A lot of cautions for mechanical failures in the beginning of the race, but now we're seeing the typical Martinsville bump and run kind of wrecks. But 9 cautions, obviously a record, like you said, for the 400 lap race. Pretty cool to see a new record set.
Yeah, but escaping that past accident, we're going to see no one pit, and we're going to see the Hamlin Wallace front row yet again. Where Denny is going to clear Wallace eventually exiting turn 4 after the first lap green, and it'll be the Hamlin Wallace 1-2 to get back into a hopeful green flag run, right?
Nope. Yeah, no chance. Chase Briscoe clips the curb, excuse me, not the wall, out of turn 3, slides him up the track, gets sideways, and Logano just accordion-like spins with them, and caution would wave a lap later. So it's just, it's really frustrating if you're Hamlin or Bubba Wallace on this front row. You just want to see the green flag just stay out and let them run to the end of the race, but nope, we would have more strategy come involved.
Yeah, definitely. And, I see nothing except hard Martinsville racing here. I have no problem with these accidents, and I wasn't even mad with this many accidents. That goes to show me that, tempers were flaring a little bit, something that NASCAR hasn't seen a whole lot this year. So it was really, really cool to see, and it was definitely something NASCAR needed, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. But moving on, Hunter Nemechek receives the free pass, and we'd see Hamlin and Bell on the front row as Wallace would choose to restart behind his Alliance teammate and owner of Denny Hamlin. But quickly, Hamlin would clear Christopher Bell. Like we've said many times, that inside line is just elite here at Martinsville. It's preferred lane, and he would start to pull away, which is just crazy for how long that he's led. His car is still consistently pulling away from these cars after he gets clear of them. But we'd kind of start to see a long, long green flag run as we're getting very, very close to the end of the race.
Yeah, we finally see our first real, quote unquote, real green flag run of stage 3, and we're going to see Hamlin catch that lap traffic while being just under a second ahead of Christopher Bell. And I also want to mention this. We're coming to the final 20, 30 laps of this race, and even though we've had a record amount of cautions, I find this hilarious. Every car is on track,
Yeah.
which I just find absolutely amazing. Josh Berry, you mentioned a battery is very difficult to come back from, and guess what? He's back out on track. Burt Myers had an electrical failure, and he's racing for a small team. They get that fixed. He's back out on track. Busher's been in 2 accidents. He's still on track. So it's really awesome to see that there is no give up, the perseverance from every team, and that every point truly does matter.
Yep. And as you mentioned, they're all racing back on the track. I think it's mainly because of the new, damaged vehicle policy. If you go back to the garage, you have unlimited time to fix that car and get it back on the track. There's no more 10 minutes, like you saw on pit road, where you have 10 minutes to fix the car, get it back on. If you go back to the garage, as long as the race is still going, you can go back on the track at any time you want. So it's kind of cool to see no DNFs so far throughout the race and have all these guys running still with all of these crazy, crazy mechanical failures that are going on in the car.
Yeah, and we like to tear NASCAR on their rule policies, but this is one that they fixed going into the season. It's a great change.
Yeah.
This is a one that NASCAR really needed. It keeps the most cars on track, even though they might not be up to pace and racing in the lead pack at Martinsville. This makes a huge deal, a lot bigger deal than it would at like a Talladega, where everyone's under a blanket for a 20th of the in 1/20th of the track.
Yeah.
Where this is one where if you're an extra car on track, you're an extra piece of traffic for the leaders to work around.
Right.
So
Right.
I think this adds to the entertainment of this race, and it would be the same for Bristol, North Wilkesboro, the All-Star race. We'll end up seeing how that'll factor in, and
Richmond.
even Richmond. Yeah, that was the other track I was trying to think of, but I'll be interested in seeing how that will play out.
Yeah, I think it's going to be even more interesting in the playoffs with this kind of round system where, every single point matters. Let's say a playoff contender, gets wrecked and, breaks a toe link or something, you have to take it to the garage. They may only lose like 2 or 3 laps under caution, get that thing back out there and still contend to fight to move on to the next round of the playoffs. I think it's going to be super, super cool in the playoffs to see how hard these teams will fight to get back on the track with unlimited amount of time.
Yeah, and especially with the free pass system, that you could go from being 3 laps down. If you get 2 quick cautions with a stage and a crash, you're back on the lead lap. And then if you have the speed to get through traffic, it'll be real interesting to see how it'll work.
Yeah, super, super cool. But moving on, Cindric would encounter a mechanical area as they run out of batteries, which is just crazy, forcing that driver to go behind the wall and go back in the garage with unlimited time to kind of fix that. But just a battery failure for Cindric's team.
Yeah, just as we had mentioned, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Just as
good.
we had mentioned, no DNFs, Cindric goes behind the wall, and you ought to think that had to have jinxed it,
Yeah.
Saying, oh, we have a great thing going here. And no sooner, Austin Cindric pulls off track, and you're like, man, you got to be kidding me. So
Yeah, just
it's
very
unfortunate
unfortunate.
ending to the day for him.
But this is where we'd see Hamlin really, really start to pull a 1.2-second lead, and that is almost unattainable at Martinsville. And it would force kind of everyone to pick up the intensity for Bell, Wallace, and Elliott to try to run harder and harder and use up their stuff to get to him. But unfortunately, it wouldn't happen. Logano had a little bit of an incident where he almost spun to bring out the caution really late. Didn't happen, and that would mean that Denny Hamlin would cross the line, coming to win the Cookout 400 with a 4.6-second lead over Christopher Bell, Bubba Wallace, Chase Elliott, and Kyle Larson, rounding out the top 5.
Yeah, and in that race, it all comes down to the end on the green flag run. No one just seemed to have the speed that Hamlin had at the end of that race.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that all goes back to pitting when there were 2 laps to go and that caution came out right before the end of stage 1.
Right.
So I think that's a huge contribution to him winning this race, and they got that car cleaned up for the back 2/3 of the race, and he put together a heck of a Martinsville race. So, congrats to Denny
Mhm.
Hamlin and his 11 team as they will leave Martinsville with the W.
Yeah, and just executed all day with strategy, pit road, track position. He had it all. I mean, in a race where we only saw 9 lead changes, you can't afford a mistake, and he didn't make one. And as we
Certainly.
saw him, do his burnout, we saw him kind of pull out a interesting flag, where it was the 11 team versus the world. Obviously, Hamlin is a huge Ohio State college football fan, and that's kind of their slogan: Ohio State versus the world. So a fan gave him the flag before the race, and he won and pulled it out, and it just kind of added to the personality that Martinsville always brings.
Yeah, he's loved just as much as his Buckeyes.
Yep.
So it's a great day for him in full, and I'm gonna take your segment. I think I've been starting these off the last few weeks, but
Go ahead.
we're gonna head into the final results, and we're gonna see your winner Hamlin with the fastest lap. So not only does he get his 53 for winning the race in the stage points, he's gonna get that extra 54th point with the Xfinity fastest lap. So it's great to see for him. And we mentioned it earlier, but he's followed by his teammate Chris Bell, his Alliance teammate Bubba Wallace, and the Hendrick cars of Elliott and Larson round off the top 5.
Yeah, just a really, really, really good points day for him. When you mentioned he got that added point for the best lap. Super good day for Wallace, Bell, and Elliott. We mentioned their names a ton in that ending of stage 2 and 3. And even Briscoe finishing 9th, starting 11th. Super good points day for him. Todd Gilliland, who we didn't mention at all during this race, finishes in the top 10 for the first time this year. So super, super good day for that 34 front row motorsports Ford.
Yeah, he started 25th. So see him up 15 spots overall, and we didn't mention his name once during this podcast. That's a heck of a silent day there for that 34 team, and he'll leave Martinsville with 27 points, which is a nice amount of points to leave with. And right behind him, Ryan Blaney will leave with a few more points than Todd Gilliland because he had the great stage point day, and with starting all the way in the back, that car started 32nd, finished 11th. That's a great day for him overall. He just kind of needs to find something here with his qualifying. Then we see Michael McDowell up 3 overall on a good day, and Ty Gibbs will finish even.
Yep.
But then we see Tyler Reddick, who's going to lose 5 on the day. After starting 9th, he'll drop back to 14th. And Ty Dillon in 15th, starting all the way back in 28th. He's up 13 spots with a good, solid day there for Colleague.
Yeah, definitely huge. Ty Dillon running 28th, starting 28th, finishing 15th. Good point save for him. Zane Smith, another front row, that 38, starting 19th, finishing 16th. Kyle Busch, unfortunately, finished 17th, starting 12th. Not bad in the top 20, getting back to those consistent runs. His teammate right behind him in Austin Dillon, going even on the day, finishing 18th. A decent point stay for that team. Senhouse finishing in 20th, starting in 34th. A great day. And then we'd see kind of our first not so good day in Byron, starting 10th, finishing 22nd. It really didn't seem like we mentioned his name a lot towards the later part of the races. He really could just not find his groove at all.
Yeah, and you mentioned Byron's name not being said at all. Well, the person that finished 24th, 2 spots behind him, had a nightmarish day as well. And this guy's name was mentioned for the wrong reason multiple times. Chris Buescher, he had his run-in with Noah Gragson, Carson Hocevar as well. So starting 6th to a 24th place finish, that's just not what that 17 car needed.
Yeah, definitely not. But Brad Keselowski going even, starting 27th, finishing 27th, a lap down. Just not good. He found his way up in the front with some pit strategy, but just couldn't contain it. Bowman, even worse, starting 3rd, finishing 28th. Again, just could not find a groove at all. So, just interesting stuff for the Hendrick. You have 2 guys running super well, 2 guys not. It was a little weird.
Yeah, and then one driver behind them that I want to mention is Josh Berry. He had such a great day going, and he's going to end up finishing with 5 points, which is such a shame. Starting 14th,
Yep.
the car was fast. but all because of a mechanical issue, or I should say electrical with the battery. He'll go from starting 14th to a 32nd place finish, not what that 21 team was looking for.
With leading 40 laps as well, just really unfortunate.
Yeah, for sure. But
But
that takes us to not only the next segment here. We're a few weeks ahead yet again due to taking a few weeks off for school to come to an end.
right.
It's been a busy last few weeks. So, but anyway, I had sent you my pick a few weeks back of who I had for Darlington. We already know who wins this race, but I want you to go first on who you had winning this race.
Right. So my pick, which might be a little bit surprising to some people, but my pick before starting this race was Chase Briscoe. He qualified inside the top 10. I just thought maybe, he would get a win. It didn't happen, but that was my pick going in
Yeah,
for the
he's the
race.
defending winner. It's a valid pick. It's a valid pick. So that's a good pick there. And I'm gonna go not far off. You mentioned defending winner, but how about real close? He made the headlines. He was in the headlines at Martinsville for the wrong reasons. I'm gonna go with the 17 team of Chris Buescher. I think they're gonna have a huge bounce back at Darlington.
It's a great
They
pick.
got walled by Tyler Reddick and kind of had the race stolen from him, the one that Brad won last year. So I'm locked in with that 17 team, and I'm riding strong going into Darlington.
I love it. I love it. Well, that's all we have on the Cookout 400 at Martinsville. I want to thank everyone for listening to this podcast. Sorry it's been a little late, but we're getting back on the grind as we move into the summer months of the NASCAR season. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you with the Darlington podcast very soon.
See you later, guys.